So welcome to this interview. I just want to ask you guys a few questions before you join the base. First of all, I understand your names are Boris and Ray. Is that a real name or what is that?
It's a real name.
Your real name, okay. That's good.
Yeah, it's my real name. It's my real name.
Good, because operational security, OPSEC is quite important to us, and it's important that we all use our real names with each other to avoid making up for some past mistakes.
You never know who's looking. Really,
you really can't be too careful. So the first question, I suppose, is how do you identify racially? Either one of you. Let's start with Boris. You have a very Slavic name. Can I assume you are of Slavic stock?
Well, yeah, but Boris Johnson is also named Boris, and I'm actually part English, quarter Irish. I do have a grandmother who was Cherokee. I hope that won't be a problem.
All right. Well, I can say that I'd say if you identify strongly with that Cherokee side, I would maybe think that could be a little problematic. But Ray, let me ask, have you now or have you ever been a member of the United States intelligence community?
No, not at all.
It's completely okay if you have. I mean, I am currently a spy for the CIA.
Oh.
So we're very open to the intelligence community here as part of our OPSEC. Are you now, Ray? Have you ever been an undercover reporter, Boris or Ray from, per se, Canada or one of those?
No, I'm afraid not. I hope that's not a requirement for me.
Well, it's not a requirement. It's encouraged, but I think it's something that we can get around. Boris, let me ask you, if you don't mind, have you ever sacrificed or drunken the blood of a goat or chihuahua, perhaps a gerbil? Really, anything smaller than a gerbil would be a little bit of an issue for us, but gerbil and up.
Gerbil and up, yeah. I've definitely done gerbil and up.
That's
gerbil
good.
and
All
up,
right.
yeah,
That's
for
great.
sure.
Did you?
I'm ready.
Partake?
I'm ready.
All right. Have you ever, either of you ever dressed up as any other Power Ranger other than red or blue or green? This can be a party.
I think that the Yellow Ranger, if I'm not mistaken, was an Asian Ranger.
That's correct.
Which is within the acceptable range.
No, we do. We actually are very focused on more the red, blue, and green Power Ranger races overall. Is that a problem for either of you?
I'm sorry, I was completely unaware of this.
All right. Well, I think we can work around that. Have either of you ever read the book Siege by James Mason?
Yes.
You have? And Boris?
I love Siege. Siege is my favorite book.
What is your favorite parts of Siege?
Siege.
Yes.
I like his ideas of nuclear warfare.
Nuclear war. Mm-hmm. Okay.
He's very straightforward. He doesn't mess around. He doesn't take shit from nobody. You know.
Right. Well, that's good enough for me, boys. I'm going to be sending you now an email with the next steps. Hold on. Let me just do that. Okay. No. All right. I sent you a Word document with my login credentials and bank info and a membership list of the base. I'm just going to need you to ignore that email. Maybe delete it. Again,
Sure.
OPSEC, very important here at the base. Well, all right. So, guys, thanks for everything. I look forward to drinking some goat blood and dropping some DMT with you.
Actually, you do not drop DMT. DMT is primarily smoke.
You guys passed. Welcome to the base.
Awesome.
right, so this is The Empire Never Ended, now an affiliate of the neo-Nazi fan club slash training ground slash networking organization, The Base. I'm Fritz. We already introduced new recruits, Boris and Ray here.
Yeah, hi.
Hey.
What was that character? Who were you channeling there?
You know, I don't know. I think I started somewhere else, and then it turned into like a 16-year-old kid.
It got increasingly, it got increasingly, well, enthusiastic, though. I appreciate that, you know, the base is nothing if not enthusiastic. Well, that was, I was trying to do my best Ron there, my best Ronaldo Nazarro, who we'll be talking about at great length today.
Nazarro or Nazarro?
Nazarro.
From New Jersey.
Yeah, it's Ron Nazarro is his
Ron
name.
Nazarro.
Yeah. Ronaldo Nazarro. That's his name.
Ronnie N.
So he's a well-to-do Catholic young man from New Jersey,
Northern New Jersey.
Yeah, we know the type. So we're gonna talk a bit about them today. We're gonna go over the basics. Fuck this show. We're gonna go over the basics of what they are, a bit about Ron's biography, some of the bizarre rogues gallery.
We're talking about the Base, which is also a so-called siege build group. So we covered
That's
already.
right.
We had an episode about Atomwaffen, and then we had a second episode about a bunch of Atomwaffen offshoots and related groups.
Yeah, whole
and now we're having,
Waffenhaus.
and so the Base is worth of having its own episode.
It's
Why
a
is
very
that?
nice. It ties off our sort of season of episodes quite nicely. Everything kind of comes together in here. You got your Satanists, you got your deep state, you got some international intrigue, a bunch of little Kriegs and Waffens floating around. It's all here. It's all here. James Mason. So the Base is. It's sort of the spirit animal of this season, and very much like everyone else in this season, it's ridiculous and insane, and essentially kills itself over time. Yeah. So, not to spoil the ending, let's get into it. So, what is the Base? It is a networking and training platform, primarily for U.S. Nazis, but it's got membership in a lot of different countries, like Europe and countries like Europe.
In Africa.
Yeah, countries like Europe and Africa, the Australasia islands, all those countries. 20% of the recruits of the Base, a couple of whom you heard in the introduction, were active military, or said they were active military anyway, or had at some point served in the military. But what the Base really seems to be is some kind of a farm for growing and harvesting state informants, I would say. It is got to be.
I think to a much higher degree than any of the previous groups that we've covered. Even though, obviously, I mean, like neo-Nazi groups are pretty famous for getting infiltrated and
famously
for,
leaky.
having FBI informants or whatever intelligence agency informants.
But this is another level, man.
Yeah,
this has got to be
level.
the most infiltrated neo-Nazi organization in recent times. At least 8 of the 10, we'll say, key players in this story are arrested. Maybe 9 at this point, actually. I'm not sure. But the base was infiltrated at different points in its history by the FBI, by fucking Vice News, by Eugene Antifa. Big shout out to them for incredible work. Some guy at the Winnipeg Free Press who had never done anything like this before, just sort of thought, how the fuck hard can it be, and did it. The Guardian, and maybe I don't know. I think it's hard to say, but maybe the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center. But if not, they at least have pretty damn good sources and contacts and stuff. But so it's run by a man named, as we said, Ronaldo Nazarro, aka Norman Spear, aka Roman Wolf, aka Ron. So Ron ran the whole thing from St. Petersburg in Russia the whole time. So keep in mind that when we're looking at the real meat of this story, the leader is bravely many kilometers away in a country with no extradition agreements with America.
And there was so we already covered a similar situation when a very important person for Atovaffen division also lived in Russia. The difference being that Slavlos in that case was actually a Russian citizen, like Ron.
Right. So who is Ron? Who is Ron? Ron, from this fantastic article in The Intelligencer, which we'll post a link to somewhere, somehow, did this fantastic biography very recently on Ron here. Ron is the alumnus of this elite Delbarton school in Morristown, I think they say. The tuition of the school today is about $40,000 a year. I'm not sure what it was in the 80s, but you can imagine it was relatively similar economically. And so in the early 90s, around 91-ish, Ron goes to college at Villanova, which is a kind of a conservative university. He looks totally grunged out. He's, I imagine him with his hacky sack
got the
and
kind
his
of
beanie
and long hair,
wearing Alice in Chains t-shirts and stuff. His friends called him a rock and roll stoner dude. He was also a bit of a lib. Like he joined the DSA, for instance, the Democratic Socialists of America.
Back before the DSA, had this revival now post, 2016. I mean, you had to be a pretty big nerd to get into DSA shit back in the 90s.
Yeah. But it's tough to say. I mean, I said lib instead of socialist mostly because he's not really remembered for being very political. He would just kind of take popular
DSA
stands on
is
diversity
also pretty much
and
just
equality.
liberals.
Sure. Yeah. So 94, he just drops out of school, and it comes as a surprise to most people he knew. But he disappears and reappears, working for the deep state. Big surprise. There is again tying us way back to the first episode. There's always some creepy little fucking intelligence connection somewhere. So this is from The Intelligencer, that fantastic article. In early 1999, Nazarro did a 2-month internship with the National Defense Council Foundation, a small think tank in Alexandria, devoted to special operations and energy security. For the conservative Washington Times, he co-bylined a pro-drug war op-ed called Marijuana Canard with the NDCF's founder and director, Major Andy Messing. This is the reporter, when I reached Messing recently, he struggled to recall Nazarro. He would have been at the foundation twice a week for 6 hours per day, being directed to read defense-related materials. Out of the dozens of former interns I had, he just doesn't stand out. The NDCF, according to another former intern from Nazarro's era, had a special interest in asymmetric warfare, a subject which would later preoccupy Nazarro's white nationalist alter ego Norman Spear. We're going to, at the end of this show, talk a bit about his sort of guerrilla warfare theory. I'm nothing super surprising there, but I mean, it's informative.
I wasn't aware that you could become an intern at one of these places without a college degree. That's kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, that might be answered a little bit with who his mom is,
all right.
Who I don't know a whole lot about, to be honest.
But this is okay. Maybe you can also cut this if it's not relevant. But I immediately were not thinking about the Epstein and him being him getting a job in some very well-off high school, I think, without a college degree. Because of connections, and people assumed that he was already kind of an intelligence asset by that time. So yeah,
that's I don't know what to make of all this yet. Yeah. It all feels like it's gonna make me crazy the more I have to think about stuff like that. We'll get to it. We'll someday maybe we'll have just a straight up what the fuck is going on with the CIA episode, because I would like to know.
Yes,
this stuff's it's bugging me. So Homeboy forms in 2002 after 9/11. He forms this group called Omega Solutions International, which was during what was called the post 9/11 defense contractor gold rush. He incorporates this company in New York City, and he calls it a security consulting firm specializing in command, control, and intelligence for homeland security, counterterrorism, and counterinsurgency missions at every echelon. And he claims later to have worked in Iraq and Afghanistan as a contractor, as an intelligence contractor. The State Department, however, has denied any freedom of information requests about this. Seal all up. Nothing suspicious here. Nothing to look at. In 2003, his mom buys him a flat in Arlington, Virginia for $282,000. And she doesn't, when I say buy, I mean like literally whips out a checkbook.
Buys outright, right? Yeah, like
buys the whole thing outright, yeah. So, I mean, it's not like it's a super expensive house. It's that it's, it's a super expensive flat, actually. Yeah. Okay. So Ron is set up. His mom bought him a house. He's tight with the intelligence agencies. He gets engaged to a PsyOps specialist at Fort Bragg. But the whole marriage falls through. She ends up working for the State Department herself as like a fun side note. So Ron moves to Manhattan, and he sells in 2007 his Arlington flat for $417,000, which, if you remember, is more than a third of the more of a profit on the original. And he moves to Manhattan. He buys a flat there. Again, whips out that checkbook for $585,000 in this very hip kind of designer complex in Manhattan.
So, I mean, he's rich. His family's rich, but he's also clearly making some money in the
I think he's doing well.
Industry, yeah.
I think there's no reason to doubt that he did work in Iraq and Afghanistan for the State Department. I mean, it's not like they sent something back with like, oh, nothing to see here. They sent it back with, sorry, those records are closed.
Right. That's his claim, right? Did you mention it already? Or?
That he claims to have worked in Iraq and Afghanistan, yeah.
And journalists, I think, that tried to request information from the U.S. government were denied.
Yeah.
Which probably means it's true, no?
Yeah.
I mean...
One can assume.
Yeah, definitely allegedly. So his mom gets married to this elite corporate law firm partner who helps Ron incorporate this Omega Solutions International group in New York and sets up a trademark for OSI's proprietary software.
So when was this?
This is in 2007. So this is from the BBC now. Records show before moving to Russia, Nazarro ran a company registered in New York that offered access to a network of security professionals with expertise in intelligence, counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, and psychological operations. A website for the firm, Omega Solutions, once stated, "Our associates have worked with various government and military agencies, including multiple wartime deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan." So, I mean, everybody's saying it, except the State Department. So Ron, also, after his mom, gets married. In 2012, at the age of 39, he gets married to Lyudmila Sergeyeva, with whom he will have children. And they get married at St. Nicholas Cathedral next to Central Park, which is, as I understand it, a big Russian Orthodox cathedral.
So now, he's not a Nazi yet, but since we do have the recurring theme of Nazi weddings, can we just compare this to the previous two that we've talked about? Because this one's really over the top in terms of like actually being fucking fancy and whatnot.
At the last Nazi wedding, I remember they cut their hands over a copy of Mein Kampf. That's how it went. Those people were actually Nazis at the time. Ron hasn't discovered his Nazi side, as far as we know.
They're just rich
at this
people.
point. They're just rich. So Lyudmila wears a Vera Wang getup that costs somewhere between like $3,000 and $7,000. I looked it up because I had no idea if this is normal or not, and the U.S. average is $1,500. So like at absolute best, this is twice as fancy as your average wedding. She gets a bouquet based on Kate Middleton's bouquet. She gets a stretch limo, wedding rings from Tiffany's, all that stuff. So they get married. They move in together to Ron's swanky Manhattan apartment. And the neighbor says, he was never around. She was nebulous. I couldn't get a straight story. I suggested we get dinner. I never met him. I always suspected he was something like a CIA operative. That's just his neighbor. Like, everybody fucking knows.
But it's very specific, okay? You have you have a neighbor who's like not often home, and you think he's CIA. I mean, there's probably something more than that.
Well, the doorman also had some suspicions, saying that Ron
was always
on missions and stuff. So So, all right, he's not like, again, look, I mean, Ron is not well known in the Nazi community now for operation security, despite being a security consultant, an intelligence consultant. It doesn't surprise me at all that his fucking doorman would have just figured it out. He's not, I mean, he just smells like a spy. So he has his first daughter, moves back to DC, and gets a $675,000 house in Georgetown. So he comes back
stepping it up incrementally each time.
Yeah, on his own money and with only a little support from his mom. So at this point, shit starts to get weird, right? He suddenly sells this Georgetown house after only 1 year and moves to Jersey, to North Bergen, New Jersey, in an apartment that's owned by his family. His friends say that he just starts to get withdrawn, starts acting weird. And then he has his second daughter, and they go to Disney World, in 2017. So there's this intelligencer found this 30-minute video taken by his wife on this trip. And the whole time they point out that Nazarro is just dour, just a very serious guy. As his older daughter sits on his shoulders, gazing rapturously at the Magic Kingdom, while Once Upon a Time plays, Nazarro says in a flat tone, "Lived happily ever after. The end." So that's like their last known family video before he becomes a full-blown Nazi. So already at that point, so that's 2017, right? Already at 2016, we have the appearance of somebody named Norman Spear, who we now know to be Rinaldo. Norman Spear is born on Twitter and becomes very popular very quickly for just increasingly radical posts. And in April of 2017, the SPLC is already putting some attention on his account. And at this point, a man named Harold Covington dies at the age of 64. Someone who's come up once or twice before. Ray, maybe you could fill us in a little bit about who Harry is.
Yeah, but what is the connection? Is there a connection between...
Yeah, so the connection here is that Ron on this podcast a little bit later called the Roper Report with this complete piece of shit named Billy Roper talks about the need for a revolutionary vanguard and advocated for an existing group called the Northwestern Front. Now this was Harold Covington's white separatist group. So I don't know if you know much about Harry and what happened to him.
Well, he's been like a Nazi for decades, kind of well-known person who wanted to be like notorious on purpose. Also a bit of a clown, but one of the leaders of the Nazi movement in America. So in our first episode, we talked about Combat 18 in Britain in the early 90s. At that time, Combat 18 had like a close relationship with Harold Covington, who lived in Britain for a couple of years, and then he went back to the States. But for example, in the early 90s, if you wanted to contact Combat 18, you would write to Harold Covington's address in America, and then he would forward this back to Britain. So they have a close relationship.
Because Combat 18 was banned in the UK at the time, right? So the only way you could get in touch with him was through the US. Yeah.
But he was I think, originally member of the American Nazi Party when they changed the name to the National Socialist White People's Party, I think.
To be subtler.
I think from 71 to, I'm not exactly, sometime late in the 70s, he was still a member, I think. So this was the same. He had about 5-year overlap of the membership in the group with James Mason. He went in the 70s, he went to Rhodesia. He claimed he claimed to be that he was a fighter, which other Nazis said that this is not true. So he went there. So the party actually had volunteers who were fighting there, and some of them died there, I think. But they say that he was the least. He had the least. Nazis themselves said for Covington that he didn't have such an honorable role there. So he didn't fight. He went there and he saw himself as a propagandist, similar to Mason. So he wasn't fighting, he was doing Nazi propaganda.
I see.
I think he also lived in South Africa for a period. And then he went back home and he became a member of a split of the Nazi party, which was called the National Socialist Party of America, I think. And this was the leader of this was a guy called Frank Collin, who was an ex-member of the American Nazi Party, who was kicked out because they believed he was Jewish, which he denied. And then he was, I think,
He
at some
was,
point,
however, a pedophile.
Yeah, but okay, you spoiled now. I wanted to do a joke.
I do the joke.
No, because it doesn't make any sense now. Because he yes, I want to say that he was arrested, and I wanted to give you one opportunity to guess what for. So he was a child molester, yes.
Ugh.
Yeah. So after he went to prison, Covington became the leader of this group and so on. But yeah, I mean, every episode so far, I think child molestation
Yes.
and having sex with underage people was
That's
a
right.
big part of every episode. I think this is like, I think Nazis, they have more, I think, child molesters than NAMBLA has, I think.
All right, so
Carol
motherfucker.
Covington died, and then
And then the base starts. And this is, I think, Ron
and
kind of saw
Covington
his...
was a big proponent of this idea of, they have different names for it, but sometimes they call it the Northern Imperative, of basically, this is an idea that one of the originators were Aryan nations, and their leader, Richard Butler, so to start a white ethno-state somewhere in the, north.
the Pacific Northwest,
This
right?
was the
Yeah.
Northwest Territorial Imperative.
Yeah.
The Butler Plan, they called it. Yeah. All right, so he's gone, but Ron's in. Ron in 2018. Oh well, actually, I should point out that another star of our show, Grayson Denton, the hapless brother of John Cameron Denton, aka Rape from Atomwaffen, starts to rep the base on Twitter. He says that he's not a member, but he loves them, and he reposting and stuff like this. So he gets a lot of young fash cred from this. He's fashionable, you might say.
Oh.
And then in 2018, the base makes this video that shows, quote, this is from Vice News now. Vice gets involved around this point. Shows scenes of heavily armed masked men in military fatigues training in several paramilitary exercises, ending with death threats towards Vice reporters and other journalists who have covered the group. Vice had already kind of made some reportage on them, kind of introducing the world to the base. They'll come back on the story a little bit later, but Vice was all up on this. Their reporting on the base is real fun to read. So I hate to give credit to Vice, but
easy,
I got to do it. Well, yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, it wasn't. Sure. Yeah, they were letting pretty much anybody in.
But it was also just going on Twitter and following what people post and shit like that. And
then getting into the chats, getting onto the Discords and stuff. Yeah. So Norman Spear, Ron, appears on the Roper Report, which I mentioned a little while ago. And there he kind of elaborates with Roper on the Balk right, the Balkanization of America. They're pro this, obviously. And this is sort of the new Helter Skelter, I guess, for the base. It's it won't end in necessarily a single white superstructure. It seems more likely that small territories will begin to secede into little mini white separatist states, right? This is, I guess, also that Butler idea. So Ron says that the base is a networking platform for people who want to get together in real life, trying to get people talking. That's all he admits to on the radio. But it gets real. I mean, these guys in short time will be doing training camps, setting up assassinations, plotting mass death. So in 2018, keep in mind, I'm not sure if I had mentioned this, but Ron has been living in St. Petersburg for a while, right? He moved there with his wife. They gave up America, and from there he begins the base. So the base truly begins in St. Petersburg on Ron's computer. So in 2018, Vice does this piece on Norman Spear in November, and he mentions this kind of podcast called The West's Darkest Hour, who interviewed him. So the West Darkest Hour is taken offline as a consequence of this, and the host reaches out to Norman Spear. And Norman Spear responds to the Vice article in this way. The entire original article is fabricated from the lines of text in a general discussion room which Vice selectively picked out entirely out of context. In some cases, the text has even been truncated or nefarious words added for effect. I would never be so stupid as to discuss or plan anything illegal online, and nothing of the sort occurred. The Vice story is literally fake news, and they know it. So Vice gets all up in them after this, and sort of, challenge accepted kind of for them. And they end up uncovering some crazy shit, which we'll get into a little bit later. But in the meantime, Nazarro is, he's back in the U.S. visiting in order to buy 10 acres off grid in Ferry County, Washington. And then while he's there, he gets on this show called the Blake and Kiz Power Hour. And you can find an interview that they did with him on BitChute, of course, where else? But I would recommend, if you ever do seek this interview out, to just keep watching the rest of the show. It's like 3 hours and 46 minutes of just the most, I feel like I am 16 at an IHOP at 2:30 in the morning, like overhearing just these fucking shitheads talk about nothing. I know I'm not selling it.
Long?
It's really fucking long. Like Ron's only on there for a little while, maybe a half an hour or something like this.
Jesus
and
Christ.
then they have then it's just like technical problems, debating ridiculously simple questions about geography and things like this. Okay, whatever. So anyway, these guys, Blake and Kiz, score this interview with Ron. And Ron lays out, I guess, on this show, we like to talk about some of the philosophies of these idiots and get into their thoughts. But I have to say, like, Ron doesn't have a lot of these. He's not a David Myatt type. He's not even a Mason type. But he does have some. He's got some ideas. But all right, so he asks what the difference is between monarchism and National Socialism. He says that they both acknowledge that a human society is naturally hierarchical, but he says that the weakness with monarchy is that in practice, when you get into the hereditary type of monarchy that's open to a lot of pitfalls, insofar as the royal bloodline could degenerate like we see in England. So, all right, okay, whatever. It's also important to keep in mind that German National Socialism was an unfinished project, so it's hard to say where that would have ended up. It couldn't have maintained the same sort of temporary martial law dictatorial powers forever. At some point, that would have to be more formalized, which is something the Italian fascism under Mussolini did, and that's why I like about them. There was a mechanism in place to get rid of Il Duce. There was a council provisions in place that if absolutely necessary. There was a way to replace the supreme leader, but if you combine everything that you can in National Socialist Germany with something like that, then there is a way to have a change of command, if necessary, in a formalized way. You'd have an ideal situation. So this is the closest. It's not funny, nothing exciting here, but this is really the closest I could get to something like a philosophy of politics from this guy.
Well, that's also, it is said that usually people who are police infiltrators are kind of like that. They're not big on ideas. And they don't discuss much.
No, and these are very general things. I mean, his critique of Hitler is that he was too much of a dictator, which is something that we all learn in middle school or whatever. It doesn't mean right. Like it pales in comparison to some of that like esoteric worship that goes into Hitler by his
especially for
contemporaries.
someone who is a leader. You would think they would have more to say or think. That they would think
he's
whatever.
extremely uncharismatic.
It's like any kind of developed political philosophy, even if it's not his own, just kind of vaguely alluding to the fact that, like, the Italians had it, figured out a little bit better than the Germans. It's pretty much meaningless. I mean, it's... Yeah.
I mean, think about when we talked about Feuerkrieg and we had the commander shoot off that message to Ron asking how he gets people to show up to meetings and stuff like that or whatever, or get people to do stuff in real life. And Ron's answer was something like, I don't know, I just make them come to meetings, and that was it. Like, what would Myatt would have been like, well, you have to summon the aeonic energies and work the star game. I made it for a reason, I don't know. Fucking Mason would be like, well, that's why I don't go or put much stock into organizations. You'd have something. But Ron's just like, I don't know. I just tell them to go.
We had a leader, and now we don't.
Yeah, exactly.
So we just gotta work with what we got now until one comes up.
Yeah, Ron is not that guy. He really isn't. He does have some, I don't know, he's got some idea about the history of the South will eventually vanish and what's left will just be whiteness. He's got some ideas about like, just the most baseline standard general whiteness over ethnicity kind of stuff. Like, don't worry about Southern identity. We're all white. It'll work out. Okay. He says Ukraine and Russia will vanish, but whiteness will remain, blah, blah, blah. So, meanwhile, the FBI
So that's what a
infiltrates
Ukrainian
the base.
said.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, the FBI gets in there, sets up some CCTV cameras in the flat of this member that we'll talk about in a bit, while Vice gets onto this chat of 50 members. So we know at least in 2018, 2019, 50 members. And only 30 of them were probably news reporters, FBI agents, antifascists, Girl Scouts, etc. So then finally in 2019, the base, I'll say that again.
The bice?
The base. In, I think it's March of 2019, I'll have to check that. The base does their first training camp in Georgia. With a plan to launch another in Spokane, Washington. Although Eugene Antifa spills the beans, leaks out a bunch of info, including on the land purchases, prompting the cops to take notice and sparking a change in local gun ordinances, which make the training impractical. So there's very localized laws end up throwing off the second thing because they had a limit of how much arms and ammunition they could get in there. And they decided it's not worth it. It's not worth to have like 50 people and 5 guns. So they didn't do it. Yeah.
So Nazarro traveled back for this, presumably.
Yeah. He came back, did some interviews, bought some land, and then bowed out again. But yeah, while he was here, though, things were getting pretty hot. He was getting a lot of attention. Local police were hip to him. Yeah. So just to sum up real quick, Ron, rich kid from Jersey, disappears into the deep state as a contractor for a while, pops out a Nazi. That's, I guess, the main thrust here of what's gone on so far. Base already getting infiltrated heavily, information just leaking out. And that's where this guy, Ryan Thorpe, comes in. Ryan Thorpe is a journalist for the Winnipeg Free Press who decided just to try. I
kind of love this guy, by the way. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean, I don't really know
Mad
much about him
Ryan
other
Thorpe.
than just kind of listening to him infiltrate the base, but it's pretty badass for a local newspaper guy to just go ahead and infiltrate a multinational Nazi network.
Yes. Yeah. So it all centers around this Nazi named Patrick Jordan Matthews, who at the time is 26. He goes by Jimmy Dave Arcturum and the Coincidence Detector on his various online platforms. Okay. He is also Canadian Armed Forces Reserve Combat Engineer Master Corporal. And looks, by the way, a little bit like Dolph Lundgren. So you got to imagine he's got mad Nazi cred, right?
Yeah, I mean that's good Aryan stock there.
Yeah. So one of his big contributions was to build a machine gun to fire on a public gun rights rally. Ironically enough, which didn't end up happening. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so in July of 2019. Matthews puts up a bunch of posters in Winnipeg against Antifa, but also a bunch of recruitment posters that say, "Save your race, join the base."
Hey,
and the base, learn, train, fight. Yeah. Again, low on the ideology, very high on the come and join my chat group and take some pictures of yourself. Kind of methodology here. So the Winnipeg Free Press reporter, Ryan Thorpe, goes ahead and, despite having no experience whatsoever in this, to infiltrate the base, the Nazi terrorist organization. And he does this extremely easily and meets up with Matthews, who just opens up to this dude.
That's
Matthews
fantastic.
just opens up to Ryan.
And the setting is great, too. Like, they're on some, train tracks or something.
Yes. Very romantic.
And the guy just,
romantic.
Within 2 minutes of meeting him, gives him his full government name and starts telling him about his relationship problems, his entire life. He just completely spills it out, everything.
Yes, yeah. Jimmy becomes a bit of a talking point later for base recruits. After this, he's a message in a way, a lesson that was not learned by anyone. So here's what happens. So already 1 month later, Ryan's already outing him in print as a cell organizer of the base. So he meets him in July, gets so much information within a couple of weeks that he's got plenty to write a relatively in-depth report on this guy. So as part of his vetting process, Thorpe filled out a questionnaire. This is all from the Intelligencer, by the way, responding to questions about military experience, any knowledge of chemistry or engineering, firearms training, his political worldview, his location, and his desired pseudonym. After that, Wolf engaged, that's Ron's, other nom de guerre, engaged him over Proton Mail, asking about his experience with Siege, an influential accelerationist book written by a Nazi named James Mason. Thorpe did a quick crash course to answer plausibly, which I sympathize with so much because I understand why it worked so well. We read that thing because we're fucking idiots. But like, Brian Thorpe didn't need to read Siege to get into the base. Like he did like a little primer and walked in. He's like, I don't know, I guess I like murder and stuff, right? You know, like that's what it's about, I guess. I mean, there's not a lot to learn from that book.
To kill.
Yes, yeah.
That's it.
I mean, it's not like fucking Ronaldo Nazarro read it either, the fucking spy, you know? Like, yeah, that sounds about right, sure. So Thorpe, he's hearing some grief from them. Like, they're opening up to Thorpe already in this interview, and they're telling him, like, oh, this Vice reportage, you know, it really hurt us, and this reporter infiltrated our chat, so we've upped our security. That won't happen again, he tells the reporter who is currently infiltrating their chat. Yeah. Oh, fantastic OPSEC. Fantastic. Matthews, going back to Matthews. This is his background before Thorpe outs him. Okay, so Matthews is out. Thorpe has somehow broken through his defenses, like with his master espionage skills, uncovered everything that Matthews drunkenly yelled at him at a bar. And Matthews is then, quote, voluntarily released from the military, and he leaves the country with the help of this cell based in Maryland, who drives all the way up to Minnesota to pick him up on August 30th of 2019. So they drive him back. They set him up in Delaware at this house. And this is when the FBI sets up all those aforementioned cameras. In Delaware, the FBI sneaks around. They find a bunch of base flyers, communications devices, rifle cases, go bags full of military rations, knives, and a video of Matthews wearing a gas mask and expounding on his beliefs, just in his own fucking house. So they're looking around to see if this guy's a Nazi.
Funny to me is because they
yes.
Of course they have to have the video of themselves in a gas mask.
Oh my God.
Like, you know, it's not.
But you know what I love about this is like, even do you remember when what's his fucking name, the nail bomber, Copeland?
Yeah.
When they walk into Copeland's house, you know, and they see like the swastika flag and like the whatever it was, munitions and Mein Kampf and shit like that, and they're like, well, we don't know for sure if he's a Nazi, but like you can't stop them.
To extremist groups,
yeah, this guy has a video of himself lying around that's like, in case any of that wasn't clear, I'm a total fucking Nazi. Like, yeah. Wonderful. So it's like maybe this is all just a normal job interview to join the FBI. Maybe this is just how you get in these days. So the FBI installs a video camera and a microphone in his apartment, and over the next month captures hours of video of the men talking about guns, playing with an assault rifle, which Matthews repeatedly aimed, practicing magazine reloads, and executing tactical entries from the kitchen into the living room. Talking about an upcoming gun rights protest in Virginia, Matthews was recorded saying, you want to create some fucking instability while the Virginia situation is happening, make other things happen, derail some lines, fucking like shut down the highways or roadblock. Great, let's shut down the rest of the roads, you know? You can kick off the economic collapse in the U.S. within a week after the boog starts, eh? That's what he said. Lemley, one other guy we'll get to in a second, Brian, was talking about using a thermal imaging scope on his rifle to ambush civilians and police. He said, I need to claim my first victim. If there's like a Popo cruiser parked on the street, he doesn't have any backup, I can execute him at a whim and just take his stuff. He literally has zero chance of not being ganked, he says. This is all reporting from also the Intelligencer. So who's this Lemley guy? who's the guy that literally needs to claim his first victim, which is now how he talks. His name on these chats was Can't Go Back. He's a 33-year-old fella, and he's connected to somebody named William Garfield Billy Bro. So just to make it clear, his name is Billy Bro. Billy Bro.
That's awesome.
So these are the guys that take Matthews in. The ones that drive up to Minnesota to grab him. They're both from Maryland. Lemley is a U.S. Army veteran who claims to have suffered from PTSD during a tour in Iraq. He was honorably discharged in 2007, says the Baltimore Sun. In December, Lemley and Matthews used an upper receiver ordered by Lemley as well as other firearm parts to make their own assault rifle. This is from some court documents. And also around this time, Vice follows up on this Winnipeg Free Press story with their own story on Matthews, prompting death threats from the base to Vice, which get filmed and all that. We mentioned that a little while ago. Lemley's Matthews and Billy Bro allegedly attempt to manufacture a controlled substance known as DMT at Lemley and Matthews' apartment. DMT is the drug of choice for the base. A couple times this will come up here.
This is kind of surprising to me, actually. It's, I don't know.
It is surprising, you're saying?
Yeah, because they're otherwise don't seem to be like super like esoteric, weird, whatever.
I'm saying it really puts a chink in that, in that theory every psychedelic user loves to have when they're high and saying like, man, if Nazis just did this, there'd be no Nazis. But we know it's not the case.
Oh, we definitely know that's not the case.
Nazis are gonna Nazi. That's all they're gonna do.
We mentioned the Manson family a lot of times.
Yeah, well, of course.
I mean, they were all on LSD
classic.
there all the time. Although they combined it with speed all the time. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, but this is where like LSD actually makes sense to do in this kind of context. It just like alters your reality a little bit. DMT is a completely different thing. I mean, Terrence McKenna talked about the machine
psychic
elves
brain drop.
It's just being transported to a completely different reality.
But it's also famous for, I mean, again, its reputation is that it also gives a sense of like universal unity and like, you know what I mean? Which maybe, I don't know. I never took it, but tell you what, as research for this show, I will volunteer to take bathtub DMT.
Yeah, well, we can do that.
All right.
I've been privy
Look forward to that
the
episode.
Manufacture of DMT many
All right, let's do it. Let's do it. So listeners, you know where to get some. Okay, so hey, jokes. Them's the jokes, folks. We're on the straight and narrow on this podcast.
We're straight edge
podcasters. Let me just sip this Jabrovska here. All right. So in January of 2020, according to this affidavit, Lemley and Matthews purchased approximately 1,650 rounds of 5.56 millimeter and 6.5 millimeter ammunition, traveled from Delaware to a gun range in Maryland, where they shot the assault rifle, retrieved plate carriers for body armor, and at least some of the purchased ammunition from Lemley's old residence in Maryland. So they're collecting all their supplies and shooting them off. So on January 14th, warrants go out for the arrest of 7 base members. We're going to talk about more of them in a minute. The FBI uncovered evidence that several of these members were plotting a violent attack on crowds in Richmond, Virginia, which was stopped. And specifically, what they were attacking was the VCDL lobby day that was a few days away, where they expect a regular turnout of gun nuts, essentially. Gun rights people come regularly out to this lobby day to show their support. So the idea was to open fire on these guys, presumably because they would assume it was like an attack from Antifa super soldiers, I guess. I'm not sure what the ends of this were, but
super
again,
soldiers again being very well known for mass shootings. It's
yeah. I don't know why nobody's talking about them anymore. It's clear that they are also part of the deep state. Just saying, nobody's talking about the Antifa super soldiers anymore. All right. So, along with transporting firearms and ammunition with an attempt to commit a felony, they picked up Lemley and Billy Bro, for harboring an undocumented immigrant, which I have to say has got to be one of the first times a Nazi's ever been charged with that.
Yeah, I mean, this really cracked me up when I read it, because it was...
Yeah. Of all the fucking things to have on your Nazi record. Yeah. So Lemley gets sentenced in December 2020 to 5 years, just recently. Billy Bro faces up to 10, but it was assumed even at the time that he'd be getting less, and he ended up with 5 years, with 3 years of supervised release for, quote, conspiring to transport an alien and to transporting the alien.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Yeah. Matthews, our Canadian friend, had a court date on January 12th to convince the judge to drop the charges, but he also faces 10 years, so we just don't know yet, of course, how that court date will play out. Because the secret is, listener, we are recording this before you're listening to it.
Oh.
Ooh, sorry to blow your minds there. But listen, hey, you can look it up right now. You can just type in fucking Brian, no, what's his fucking name? Patrick Jordan Matthews. See if he won. See if he's in jail or if he's out free. So Billy Bro also had a special role in this Georgia training camp, this hate camp that they did. I don't know if they call it that, or is that the media? Who calls it a hate camp? Do they call it a hate camp?
Atomwaffen called their camps.
Yeah, I was about
camps.
to say that. Yeah.
Okay, because it also sounds like literally every podcast about Nazis.
Yeah.
You know,
every podcast about Nazis or anything like mainstream to do with Nazis has to have hate in the name. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also like these American anti-fascist liberal NGOs use that, but also American Nazis since the 60s are proud to have the word hate in their stuff.
Yeah, going back from like
as long as everybody's agreeing.
American Nazi Party. And,
yeah.
And like hate core and music.
Yeah.
And,
but they call it that exactly to ruffle the feathers of exactly those liberal anti-fascists, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like catnip. Incidentally, if you want another perspective on this whole base debacle, you can go to a podcast called Sounds Like Hate. What else would it be called? But there's some fun recordings there.
Actual recordings of Nazarro interviewing as subjects.
Yeah. I don't know if it's funny. Maybe it's funny to me because it's so fucking banal. Like it's just.
Well, it's funny because they seem to take it really seriously,
chatting.
and the group is just like penetrated every which way by every fucking possible news organization, intelligence agency. Like, you know, it's hilarious.
Yeah. But then, you know, then they have somebody saying like the base is an anarchistic pagan group. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
like,
right. From the guy that said that
motherfucker.
hierarchy is natural to human societies.
Yeah. All right. Whatever. So Billy Bro makes some friends in Georgia. These guys are named Luke Austin Lane, aka the militant Buddhist, who's 21 years old. He's a big 09A fella. I mean, just calling himself the militant Buddhist, I think, is probably a shout out to David Mamet in some way, perhaps. But he's very open about his Order of Nine Angles affiliation. Also, Jacob Calderi also goes by the name Pestilence. He's 19 years old. And then Michael Helterbrand. And if you're a Nazi and you've got the word Helter in your last name, there is only one nickname for you, and that is Helter Skelter, which was his nickname. So Luke Austin Lane invites his buddies over, as I understand it, to his like mom's house, this property that they all have there.
Yeah, it is.
Who's down with it? It's like his mom's like, cool, you know. He says something like, I told her that we were like Nazis.
Yeah, he said that like he red pilled his mom or whatever, and like he was like showing off about it. And everybody was like, "Wow, that's fucking awesome, man!" And then like he was about to invite like all these friends over, but like she needed to know how many people were coming, and you know they can camp out at the yard and you know whatever.
Well, they did. Yeah. They did a little bit more than that though. So Billy Bro got himself a billy goat. And attempted to sacrifice that goat with a knife and failed to do so. He just tortured this poor fucking beast until they finally shot it in the head. This is keep in mind, this is sort of a kind of an 09A inspired sacrificial act, and it's just fucking mess. Grotesque mess of incompetency. And then they take a picture of themselves with the severed goat head, drink a bunch of goat blood, do some DMT, and that's their training, man. That's how you train.
How did they go into the Order 9 Angles things? Is this explained in any way, or
how did they find it? Like, how did Luke become O9A?
They became interested in that and adopted that as...
Well, I think they attracted quite a few Satanists in this thing. I mean, these are, again, the base is not really... it's not a closed group. It's more of an amalgamation of memberships of different groups. So there's Atomwaffen guys involved, for instance. They just bring their Satanism with them, and everybody loves that shit. Did
Atomwaffen members also participate in these camps and meetings?
Yeah. We're going to talk a little bit about an old friend of ours named Richard Tobin in a second here. Mm-hmm. So after this goat thing, they decided to go and kill this anti-fascist family at their home. This is Luke, Jake, and Mike now, right? This Luke Lane, Jacob Calderi, and Michael Helter Skelter Helterbrand. So instead of murdering this couple, they get arrested on the next day after Matthews gets arrested, stopping this murder again in the nick of time, and charged with stockpiling weapons and plotting a multiple murder. So that's now two horrific events that were just narrowly avoided by a timely arrest. So, I mean, how do they not know that they've been deeply infiltrated? I can't decide. Maybe because their boss is a fucking spy. The BBC reports that they were encouraged by Nazarro to do this assassination as, quote, non-attributable actions that will still send a message, which is a part of his kind of guerrilla warfare strategy, which we will also touch on. So despite being worked by the FBI, the case remained in a local Georgia court. And the judge himself in this court notes that this is very unusual. They are all apparently in custody now, pending a return to grand jury trials following the pandemic. So they're just kind of in limbo at the moment. So meanwhile, while these guys are getting arrested, Ron gets doxxed by The Guardian and the BBC on the same day. The Guardian actually had somebody inside. So kudos to them too, although again, not the hardest thing in the world to do.
Right.
On October of 2020, Justin Watkins and his Justin Watkins is 25, his subordinate, Alfred Gorman, who his name just sounds like a subordinate to me. He sounds like a butler.
Well, because he's Alfred, like Batman.
Alfred, but also Gorman. Like, that's not the name of the leader of a group of two people. Justin Watkins is the name of a leader of a group of two people. J-Watt, they called him, as opposed to Al Gore here. So these guys are both arrested as well. Watkins and Gorman tried to do the super trendy thing that Nazis love to do, which is to hunt and terrorize poor Daniel Harper over there on I Don't Speak German on December 2019. And he shines a bunch of lights into his house, takes some photos, but also in keeping with the Nazi tradition, completely finds the wrong house. Just some random fucking
So just some like random ass people, nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, though, keeping that tradition of looking for and failing to find. Daniel. So by October 2020, Watkins is claiming to be the leader of the base because Ron's been doxxed, he's disappeared. So Watkins now says he's leading the thing, saying that Gorman is, quote, a mere associate. They are arrested and charged with gang membership, unlawful posting of a message, I don't know what that means, and using computers to commit a crime. Again, fun little added charge there. These collectively carry a maximum 26-year sentence along with a $10,000 fine.
Damn.
Still in court. Yeah, so whatever. Fuck them. Al Gore and JK. Okay. So let's talk about our buddy Tobin. You guys might remember Tobin from, I think it was the last episode, where Richard Tobin tried to convince Commander to let Feuerkrieg join Atomwaffen as a vassal of Atomwaffen, to which the commander responded, "Fuck you," and then dropped the N-bomb a bunch of times. So Richard Tobin is 18. He's got a friend named Yusuf O. Barasnek, I think is how I would say that. So Dickie Tobin is from Brooklawn in Camden. Again, we're looking at a Jersey boy. once, quote, sat in the parking lot of the Menlo Park Mall in Middlesex County, New Jersey with a machete, willing himself to let loose on black shoppers in 2019. Some reporter wrote that he was enraged by the amount of black people in the mall, and that was his thought process at the time. So now Yusuf is a Jordanian Arab neo-Nazi whose dad is from Amman. Tobin has this idea to do some kind of a postmodern take on Operation Kristallnacht, which was, of course, the mass terrorism of Jewish-owned businesses, houses, synagogues, etc., which he envisions as a coordinated attack against similar sites all over the United States. So instead, he and his buddy vandalized 2 synagogues in 2 different cities. One of them is in Hancock, Michigan, and the other one is in Racine, Wisconsin. In September of 2019, they just hit them with some graffiti. So they are quickly arrested due to obvious FBI infiltration. Tobin, at this point, starts to say that he believes that Ronaldo Nazarro is a Russian spy, which is something that you do hear now and then, both on, we can say, like, the liberal anti-fascists, probably left anti-fascists as well kind of perspective, but also on the right perspective. There are rumors within the neo-Nazi community that he is a Russian spy, etc., etc. Which is weird because we know that he worked for the State Department. So it's a big jump. I guess because he's physically in St. Petersburg. But I mean, that's exactly where you should be if you don't want to come back to America. It doesn't mean you work for... I mean, does Edward Snowden work for the Russians? No. Whatever.
Well, Edward Snowden also worked for the CIA before he switched to NSA.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. Popular spot for spies. So Tobin, at 19 now, gets released on a $100,000 bond in April 2020. With no explanation from the judge, and the court records for this remain sealed. So he is out. On August of 2020, Yusuf, however, had a different experience. He pled guilty to conspiring to violate citizens' rights to use property free from threats and intimidation, and faces a maximum sentence of 10 years and a $250,000 fine. I don't know what happened in this one. The final sentencing should have been in November of 2020, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So hopefully he's still in there. Probably not. A fun quote, though, just one more character from this group of rogues, just some guy named Grimoire, another nice occultic name for you there from the base. No story to this guy, just to mention some of the stuff that gets said in these chats. So Grimoire bragged about killing civilians as a serviceman in Afghanistan, saying that... I know what it's like to kill women and children. Being a squad machine gunner in Afghanistan, I just sprayed belts of lead at targets. And there were dead women and children in circumstances. Sometimes it'd be a kid I'd start shooting at us in the first place. And he just, this is what he talks about.
But basically this guy took the door gunner sequence from Full Metal Jacket and said that was his experience.
And this is why everybody who talks about this guy Grimoire talks about him with the word he claims to have, who knows? So Grimoire at one point gets frustrated on the chats. People are talking about climate change, and it pisses him off. So he says, let's talk about pipe bombs. just fucking sick of it. So another user says, nature can suck my dick. Pipe bombs are much more interesting and a relaxing topic, but that's just asking for feds. Laughing my ass off is what he says. That's what it's like in that chat there. So how do you get in?
Nature can suck my dick. I love it.
Yeah. So just maybe to just review this little cast of characters here. We got the Canadian Matthews, who invited Ryan Thorpe into the organization. We got Brian and Billy Bro, probably also Army veterans that were responsible for taking Matthews across. They got picked up, charged as well. You got Luke Austin Lane, Jacob Calderley, Michael Helterbrand, all of them. They all got arrested. They were the Goat Blood and DMT boys.
Nice.
Justin Watkins, Alfred Gorman. Those guys got arrested. And then you got Richard Tobin and Yusuf Barasnek, and they also got arrested. So in sum, everybody got arrested. That's how it's going here. So how do you get into this top secret organization with impenetrable operational security? Well, you fill out a questionnaire like you would. It includes questions as to what neo-Nazi or pro-white group potential members represent, what their military or science and engineering training experience might have been. It takes applications with pseudonyms, but it just asks for your race and gender to be honest. You submit an application on a WordPress site, which is then read over and vetted by the base recruiters. If accepted, the user will be invited to come onto a chat server operated by Riot. Users can also be directly invited into the Riot server by an existing member. And so from this chat server, the recruit will be vetted once more. So once you're in, feasibly, let's say you're a Eugene Antifa guy, I suppose it'd be easy enough for you to just invite in whoever you want. I don't know if they did this, but it seems like out of 50 members, I mean, you're looking at a fair bit that were certainly there for nefarious reasons in Ronaldo's terminology. They have a well-defined internal chat structure on this thing. They have 8 channels. A main discussion room called the Imperium, in addition to some small dedicated channels for self-defense, books, music, activity reports. I assume that's the smallest of all of them. Trainer stuff, survivalism stuff, and just like local chats. Just talking about where you live, where you are, that kind of thing. Just in case the FBI is not sure where you are, you can tell them in this.
I assume that the Imperium is probably a Francis Parker Yockey reference, which is a guy that probably we should talk about at some point.
Oh, okay.
Why don't you introduce him now? Give us a taste.
He's an American Julius Evola.
Okay.
Let's say. He was a fascist who was already a fascist before the Second World War. He was very much into Spengler. He was a lawyer, so he managed to have some role at the Nuremberg trials.
How about that?
But he was a Nazi, but had some role in the American side. Then after the war, he wrote his magnum opus called The Imperium, I guess, which is kind of a Spenglerian Nazi book.
A history book.
It's like a fascist, history, but also like let's say fascist theory.
It sounds fun. I'm down.
I think Evola actually wrote a review of it and had like a good opinion of it. And
Was he also a esotericist in that way?
I don't think so, no. He was like a pan-European kind of a Nazi.
Okay.
And he had some supporters in the States later, and there is a revived interest in him since the 90s. And the best comprehensive book about him it's called Dreamer of the Day, written by Kevin Coogan, who unfortunately died, but who was an anarchist writer.
All right. I should mention, though, just on the off chance that any of our listeners here are looking for their gender studies, whatever, thesis topic, this chat had a section where they discussed masculinity and issues of masculinity and definitions of masculinity. And I'm telling you, do it. I'll read the shit out of it. Get it.
It's
all right.
Not just incel stuff. It's like...
I don't know what it was. I want to know. I have no idea. I would love to read a nice paper on what the base thought about masculinity.
I mean, you get some pretty weird shit. I mean, I used to go through old Stormfront threads about gender, sexuality, this, that, and the other thing. You get some
totally
very weird stuff in the Nazi world.
Yeah. All right.
I saw a new Jordan Peterson video where he talks about masculinity, and it's very, very funny. He sounds more like Kermit than ever before.
Yeah, good.
He's pissed off. He looks kind of psycho, and
he definitely looks like he's being puppeted at this point. He's just fucking skin and bone.
Something the journalist asked him so you tell to men that it's okay to be a man. And he says, it's not okay, it's necessary.
There you go. It's not okay, it's necessary.
Yeah. You can imagine him being in a partial
very
coma,
angry
in whatever quack Serbian facility he was in with just a right.
I mean, he was. I think he had a total breakdown, which was facilitated by a Slovenian and then by Russian and Serbian doctors. And
this is what you're looking at when you see Jordan Peterson is the effect of Balkan psychotherapy, folk
the
psychotherapy.
Slavs just butchered his brain. It's
yes. Well, thank you, Balkans. Should be an entertaining year.
And Russia.
Yeah,
because they kept him in a coma for no reason for a couple months.
Yeah, now he's literally become a Muppet. Yeah, great. Well, all right. So back to the base. So I should mention that all this reporting comes from Vice, by the way. It's quite detailed. So they also had this big digital archive on Mega Upload, where there were 20 different sections: guerrilla warfare tactics, gunsmithing literature, survival tactics, military tradecraft, military handling, etc., etc., etc. Within those sections are downloadable manuals, some as few as 3, such as tradecraft, and others as many as 28 for gunsmithing. Perhaps the most disturbing was a weapons section, which featured manuals on how to create explosives and chemical weapons. I'm quoting this all now from Vice. These aren't all homemade. They've been pulled from gunsmithing magazines, military handbooks, online blogs, and so on. The source material is as varied as the subject matter, they say. So they have this really lovely library, many, many, many sections, lots of fun little pamphlets, how-to guides, and stuff like that. There's a book that's called Chemicals That Can Kill You in 30 Seconds or Less, so your next book is free. 198 pages, that book. And then there's finally this 8th channel where users can direct messages to organize meetups and trainings. And each region that the base operated in had an assigned dedicated trainer who would then teach military tradecraft to the other Nazis. They also had a monthly contest that Ron was very proud of as a kind of employee motivator. So this is also from Vice now. Spear ran a monthly contest within the base encouraging meetups, and the region with the most in real life activity each month wins some unknown prize. The meetings must involve at least 2 members of the base network, that's their bar, and have some sort of photographic evidence. Sorry, I'm reading this out loud. You must submit photographic evidence of at least 2 of you in a named location doing some terrorist shit, and then post it.
So you can't just say you vandalize the synagogue. We want to see those synagogue windows.
You got to get the prize. So Spear recommends members first meet in public and allow their relationship to build trust and grow first. So go ahead and make yourself a little terrorist cell and then take a bunch of pictures for me. That's all I'm asking. Yeah. All right. So I guess the way to wrap up this whole story, let's just maybe finish up with what he said about guerrilla warfare and finish up on Ronaldo and the base. So he made a bunch of recordings under the title Guerrilla Warfare Theory, which you can find on Where Else BitChute. I'm just going to run through a real quick summary of all of them, just so, you know, even if you're curious about guerrilla warfare theory, you will realize you don't have to really read any of this. So, all right, here's what he says. He says that even a bunch of 9/11s could not force a system collapse, but a bunch of 9/11s might help a little bit. It might aid the acceleration towards the Balkanization of America. He says the realistic definition of a guerrilla victory is the transfer of power. They're not there to defeat the military. You're there to take power. He says to ask what the effect of any target's going to be. And on leaderless resistance, he maybe departs a little bit from, a lot of the siege pill kind of ideology by saying that lone wolf operations cannot be leaderless.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
Which is something I think a spy trying to set up a bunch of Nazis for capture would say.
Yeah.
I don't know, because the fact is, in theory, a completely detached, leaderless person out there, a proper lone wolf, would be the most difficult to detect. And that's kind of the point of the tactic. But here we have the guy talking about guerrilla warfare theory, which is bringing it back to a more kind of Che Guevara territory. And since he had this background in like asymmetrical warfare, it's almost certain that he read over Che. And I think it kind of comes out a little bit here. Again, well, I mean, also, if he's a spy, it makes sense.
His rationale is that if you're doing asymmetrical warfare, the opponent needs somebody to negotiate with, that is, to surrender to.
Exactly right.
Which might also come from his experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? In which you do kind of have a leadership structure, and it was quite effective, right, at destabilizing.
Yeah, that's true.
I might be giving him too much
again,
credit, but, you know.
Because I'm thinking, but it also, if you're farming Nazis, isn't it nice to stay the farmer?
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So he uses the word propaganda of the deed a lot, something that our listeners are probably pretty familiar with. Says propaganda of the word must accompany propaganda of the deed. Guerrilla warfare, this is a quote, is not simply an exercise in nihilism. Rather, it is politics via extra-constitutional means. He's against the idea of a mass uprising. His accelerationism isn't like the big race war exactly. It's more about small separatist movements. He says masses don't uprise. He says this quite a lot in interviews as well. They haven't since World War I, and they never uprise with more than 3% of the total population. But again, I don't see why, whatever. Point is to support a revolutionary vanguard, not to ignite the fires of the masses. And so he says there are three elements of guerrilla warfare. There's psychological impact, the overwhelming use of force, and surprise! Guerrilla tactics are a form of propaganda of the deed just by themselves. The fact that you're using them is somehow anti-state propaganda. He talks about sabotage not really being worthwhile, and asks, like, what's the point? Is it a problem being solved or generated? It's just a costly stunt. You got to think about the goals. And then finally responds to the Nazi naysayers of separatism who talk about Waco and how it's impossible. And he says that separatism prefigures secession. And he says that half of all UN member states were formed by breakaway states. So don't worry about it, buddy. Someday you're going to be in the big white UN. So that's more or less his kind of contribution in this regard. One more thing. Important, and also maybe a little bit 09A-ish. He advises doing community infiltration and not community building, which seems a little at odds with a lot of other stuff that he said about forming like separatist, polities, essentially. But he says for now, what you need to do is join a community and get everybody kind of into it. Blend in, bide time, organize, he says, and prepare for the inevitable confrontation ahead.
Right, which is really going to be done by the guys that sacrifice goats and do DMT. They're really going to fucking
But it would attract them because
that
checks their insight roll box, you know?
Yeah.
Is there any evidence that he himself is into Satanist stuff, or
no? He talks a bit about being Catholic. Again, like, the dude's not an ideologue. He really isn't. I think he's happy to let anybody in, really.
Was there any Temple of Blood connection with any of them?
That I don't know for sure. I would assume that, like, these guys based in Georgia that were following 09A it would be impossible that they weren't hip to Temple of Blood, but I don't have that in front of me. Okay, so how does the base end? Well, how does it seem to end anyway? It kind of just deflates in this chaotic mess on the riot. So Vice wrote this article, How One Man Built a Neo-Nazi Insurgency in Trump's America. All right, so in January, Nazarro is exposed, disappears, as I've said, but he leaves his email credentials in the chat, which immediately precipitates this massive breakdown of membership and security inside this chat. So people start fucking posting like memes in this thing, making fun of the base, like pictures of Ron and stuff like that, and like just ripping into them, you know. And they're panicked now. They're getting trolled by just randos. And one of them writes, "This is fucking embarrassing now. We lost a few members. We can deal with that. Founder gets doxxed. All right, not a big deal. Sure, it's not a great look, but now this, what a fucking joke." And somebody responds, either someone hacked it, or a previous admin who had his account hijacked, or someone who is also an admin decided they had enough, nuked all the posts, and then pissed on it. And that is the last message of the base. Before this is on the Wire, sorry, not Discord. So that was the So not with a bang, but a.
So what's going on with Ron now?
Well, I don't know.
Presumably he's still in Russia, right? I mean.
Oh yeah. I don't know what Ron's up to these days.
Do we know that if he had any problems with the Russian state, or? Well,
he in fact gave an interview on Russian media where he said that all he wanted was like a safe place for his people and stuff like that. He's not a terrorist, etc. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think that, like, you know, obviously he does have ties to the intelligence community, and, you know, there's a good chance that he's obviously a Fed or spy for either the U.S. or the Russians or both or whatever, whoever else. There's also the possibility that he's just a fuck up. Like, you know, like, the more I, like, read about him, the more I think about the fact that, like, okay, he got set up pretty well as, like, a college dropout who, like, you know, kind of through maybe family connections or whatever, got into this kind of, you know, into a career that he subsequently fucked up because he's an idiot. And then, like, tried to make some money, married pretty well into some rich kind of Russian family. Like, Lyudmila Sergeyevna's from, like, a, you know, pretty wealthy Russian family, from what I understand. Or she's actually not Russian, she's Chalvash or something, right? Yeah.
That's right, yeah. Turkic.
She's not even fucking Russian, god damn it. And, like, you know,
there's
a chance that you just, like, move to Russia and is just, like, a failure there. You know what I mean?
But, you know, he can be both. He can be a fuck up and also a Fed, because
absolutely.
they have jobs for fuck ups.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at, like for example, someone like Lee Harvey Oswald, who there is a really big chance that he was also a CIA guy, and similar to this guy who had a Russian wife, lived in Russia, had a right-wing background. I mean, he was also kind of a fuck up, and also kind of a similar kind of depressed-sounding guy. But there was a job for him, and it's usually for such people, it's not some glamorous job.
I mean, this is kind of my point. I mean, I think when people think that, like, somebody's like a, you know, an informant, a spy, an agent, this and that it's like, you know, some sort of, like, they're really doing something
James Bond,
you know,
shit.
Like, they're in contact with important people, they're doing important shit. I mean, like,
they wear tuxedos.
I mean, like, this ain't like some James Bond shit. Like, this dude is.
Nah, it's a guy from Jersey with a hoodie.
He used to have
money.
He has enough money where he can probably live okay. You know, his wife's family probably has enough money where, you know, they're doing all right. And he's, you know, tried to start a fucking neo-Nazi terrorist group and fucked it up, you know?
Yeah. I bet he's like a landlord now. I bet he's just
probably
renting
has,
out
like, some
Airbnbs
stupid
and
ass
shit. Yeah.
fucking, like, mundane side hustles.
Well, again, none of these things are mutually exclusive, sadly. There's no way to know if he's, some fucking deep state mastermind or some Arrested Development side character.
If you want to, like, manipulate and run a Nazi organization which consists of mostly teenagers,
you don't have to,
and incels, you need a fuck up for that. I mean,
it's true. I mean, you don't need someone that's that great at their job. I mean, like, again, Ryan stepped off the, you know, just walked into it with no experience or training whatsoever, and already had them complaining about getting infiltrated and stuff. So, yeah, man. I don't know. Well, I don't know. What do you think about this bulk right, since we have some loyalties to...
I think it's kind of an interesting concept. I mean, I don't really see the appeal in it obviously for multiple reasons. If I'm looking at it from their angle, if they want this, you know, this kind of fracturing of the United States is split apart into these kind of, like, small ethno-states, it's, I don't know, it seems like, it seems kind of defeatist, right? I mean, like, it's not this, like, grandiose revolutionary idea of, like, you know, George Lincoln Rockwell or something. It's this idea that, okay, we'll get this, like, shitty ethno-state in the Pacific Northwest. Oh, great. You'll be like this. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, like, you know, because they're like, oh, you know, balkanization's great. Well, we love the aesthetic. Republika Srpska. Look at, like, you know, vaporwave pictures of, like, you know, mosques being blown up.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, the result of that is, like, some really, like, shitty, poor, fucked up backwaters. I mean, like, you know, like, if that's your end goal, well, then, like... Yeah,
but compare that to the end goals of, like, Atomwaffen, or... I mean, that's way even more bleak, and, I mean, they just want a nuclear
total
wasteland.
breakdown. Yeah.
These people are, like...
Bulk right is, it's sort of the liberal element. The reformists, they're reformers. Yeah. But at least, I mean, it's kind of refreshing because when you have these Atomwaffen types, these James Mason types, the sort of nihilistic end of the Nazis, the nihilism really just does cover up the eventual idea of an imperium of some point. They're just always in denial of being mini emperors with no empire. But these guys, at least, they don't have that going on.
No.
I mean, like James Mason, he couldn't care less about his concept because even when he had he wanted to move, and he we covered in the early 90s, and he didn't have an idea where to move. He had a partner, and he let her choose where to move. So even when he was supposed to move, he didn't have, okay, maybe now I can move to this area that they want to be the white homeland or something. No, right. His partner said, okay, let's move there. I have family there. And he said, oh, fine, I don't care. So he moved into this half Latino town.
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so that's the big deflate of the base.
So in the end, the group that survives is the National Socialist Order of these siege
there we go
girls, right?
Yeah. So that's the people that made it out of this mess. Made up of people that openly say they want to be feds themselves.
Yeah, but also they are very proud that the Atomwaffen, which is the group they come out of, was never infiltrated, they say, as far as they know.
It's not an infiltration if you apply for the job.
Yeah.
I didn't infiltrate Pizza Hut.
I mean, you can say that these groups are infiltrated by some Nazis.
There you go.
The government groups infiltrated by Nazis.
Yeah, it sounds cooler that way.
Yeah.
Than saying you're a rat.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, this is the last story of the season here. We're gonna wrap it up next time with a huge. I don't know what we're gonna do. Some sort of cheesy '90s montage to music. Yeah. A bunch of scenes of us trying on different party clothes and giving thumbs up and thumbs down, and
then we're gonna shift gears and go into a kind of completely different direction.
Oh yeah.
In the
we're
next
gonna
season.
shake off this yolk.
We'll let you know more about that in the next episode.
But don't worry, I promise you, right-wing politics and deep state conspiracies will still be close at hand.
All that fun stuff.
That's right.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some real men.
Yeah, so listen up, Nazis. All right, let's not give them any ideas. All right, guys, so that's The Empire Never Ended.
Later.
See you later. Hey there, Fritz here from The Empire Never Ended. This has been one of our weekly free episodes for free people. But for premium people, we also have weekly premium episodes, which you can get at patreon.com/tenepod, TENEPOD, and also follow our various social media things in the show description there. Like and subscribe them. Follow them. Like and follow and subscribe. Follow them. Do it.